If you do even 3 of these things when you are completely alone, your brain is wired in a way psychologists say less than 2% of people will ever experience. Not 20%, not 10%. 2. And here's the thing about rare intelligence that nobody talks about. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up at parties. It doesn't raise its hand in meetings. It doesn't look the way movies told you it would. It hides. It whispers. It works the night shift inside your own head while the rest of the world is asleep. The real signatures of an exceptionally rare mind aren't found in test scores or titles. They're found in the quiet, private, slightly strange things you do when no one is watching. When the house is empty. When the phone is down. When it's just you and whatever your brain decides to do with the silence. This video is about those things. Stay until number 7. That one doesn't just describe you. It completely rewires how you see yourself. Trait 1. You have full, detailed arguments with yourself. Not out loud. Nobody hears this. But alone, in the car, in the shower, staring at the ceiling at midnight, you're not just thinking. You're debating. You take a position. Then you argue against it. Then you argue against that. You play every side. You cross-examine your own conclusions like a lawyer who doesn't trust the witness, even when the witness is you. Most people don't do this. Most people land on an opinion and stay there. Psychologist Albert Ellis found that high-functioning minds run a continuous internal debate, not out of confusion, but because they are constitutionally unable to accept a conclusion that hasn't been stress-tested. The outside world calls this overthinking. Your partner calls it indecisiveness. You call it exhausting. But here's the scientific truth. Your brain doesn't treat beliefs as facts. It treats them as hypotheses, always in revision, always being tested. That is not a disorder. That is intellectual integrity. Trait 2. You mentally replay conversations, sometimes years later. It's 2 a.m. You're lying in bed, completely still, and suddenly, for no logical reason, you're back in a conversation from 3 years ago, or maybe last Tuesday, hearing the exact words, feeling the exact room temperature, wondering what you should have said, wondering what they meant under the words they actually used. Psychologists call this psychic overexcitability, an intensified inner life that keeps processing experience long after the moment has ended. Research consistently finds this in people with rare cognitive depth. The world calls it anxiety, sensitivity, an inability to let go. Your brain calls it unfinished analysis. Because here's what's really happening. You're not replaying the conversation because you're insecure. You're replaying it because your mind detected a pattern it hasn't fully decoded yet. You are not ruminating. You are running a delayed intelligence report. Trait 3. You lose hours to a single thought. You sit down to think about something for 10 minutes. You look up. It's been 4 hours. You weren't distracted. You weren't scrolling. You weren't doing anything the world would call productive. You were just following a thread, and then a thread off that thread. And then somewhere you ended up 3 miles deep in an idea that started as something completely ordinary. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow found that people with exceptional cognitive depth enter spontaneous flow states, not during structured work, but during private, unguided thought. The mind finds something worth following, and it follows it past hunger, past time, past every reasonable stopping point. The world calls this poor discipline. The world calls this a lack of focus. The scientific truth is this. A brain that can hold one idea long enough to go that deep into it is extraordinarily rare. Most minds bounce. Yours burrows. That is not distraction. That is depth. Trait 4. Shallow conversation leaves you quietly hollow, but you never say so. You go to the party. You smile. You answer the questions. You do everything right. Then you drive home alone, and something feels off. Not bad exactly. Just empty. Like you went through the full motion of human connection and came back with nothing in your hands. You don't tell anyone this. It sounds arrogant, so you keep it to yourself. But researchers at the London School of Economics found something precise about this. People with higher intelligence consistently report less satisfaction from frequent social interaction. Not because they dislike people, but because the depth of exchange in most social settings falls below what their mind requires to feel genuinely engaged. The world calls this coldness introversion, a superiority complex. The truth is far simpler. You're not above the conversation. You're experiencing it at a different resolution. You want to talk about real things, uncomfortable things, things that don't have clean answers. Most rooms weren't built for that. You're not antisocial. You're understimulated. Trait 5. Before you act, even on small things, you've already run the simulation. Before you send the text, you've imagined 3 responses. Before you walk into the room, you've already mapped the temperature of it. Before you order the food, sometimes, you've quietly gamed out which choice you'll regret. Even for things that don't matter. Especially for things that don't matter. Neuroscientist Rex Young at the University of New Mexico found that highly intelligent brains show significantly greater connectivity between distant neural regions, meaning they automatically pull in more variables when processing any situation. Even a low-stakes one. The brain doesn't know how to turn this off. The world calls this paralysis. Indecision. Anxiety. The truth is your mind genuinely sees more possible outcomes than most people see, and takes the full picture seriously before it moves. That pause before you act isn't fear. That is a wider lens doing its job. Stop for a second. Look at what these 5 things have in common. The internal debate. The 2 a.m. replay. The hours lost in one idea. The hollow feeling after shallow conversation. The quiet simulation before every move. The world has a name for all of these. Anxious. Oversensitive. Undisciplined. Antisocial. Indecisive. Every single label points inward, like something is wrong with the wiring. But what if the wiring is exactly right, and the environments just weren't built for it? What if what looks like a list of problems is actually a single coherent thing? A mind designed for more depth than most situations offer. 2 more to go. These are the ones that change how you see yourself. Trait 6. Silence isn't empty for you. It's where you actually think. Other people tolerate silence. They fill it. They turn on music, pull out the phone, find something, anything, to put between themselves and the quiet. You do the opposite. Alone in a silent room, something happens. Things connect that wouldn't connect in noise. Problems you couldn't crack in conversation dissolve in 20 minutes of stillness. Ideas arrive that weren't there before. Silence, for you, is not the absence of input. It is the input. Researcher Lita Hollingworth described what she called stimulus poverty, the phenomenon where constant noise and social input actively block the deeper cognitive processing of highly intelligent minds. The brain needs quiet not to rest, but to run. The world calls this withdrawal. Isolation. Antisocial behavior. The scientific truth is that the most generative thinking you do happens in a room with no audience. Your silence isn't empty. Your silence is full. The world just can't hear it. Trait 7. You go back and question things you already decided, alone, quietly, over and over. This is the one. Everyone else has moved on. The decision was made. The opinion was formed. The conclusion landed and stayed. But you come back to it. Washing the dishes. Walking the same block at the same time. Lying in bed the night before something important. Alone, you pull it again. Is this actually true? Did I get this right? What am I missing? Not because you're insecure, but because something in you refuses to confuse settled with correct. Carol Dweck's research at Stanford found this consistently in people with the deepest intellectual capacity, a fundamental discomfort with their own certainty, a mind that treats its past conclusions the way others treat current problems. Still open, still being worked on. The world calls this self-doubt. Instability, an inability to commit. Dweck called it the honest, continuous update of a mind that will not stop growing. The person who keeps questioning what they already believe is not confused. They are not broken. They're just not finished. They never are. That's the point. If even 3 of these felt like someone describing your own brain, drop a comment with the number that hit closest to home. Not a paragraph, just a number. I read every single one. And if this video gave language to something you've been sitting with quietly for a long time, something you never quite had words for, share it with one person who needs to hear it tonight. Not as a flex, as a gift. Because somewhere right now, someone is lying awake at 2 a.m., replaying a conversation, losing hours to a single thought, driving home from a party feeling hollow, and genuinely believing something is wrong with them. Show them there isn't.